Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Manuela Dal Forno, and I am a postdoc in the botany department since June last year. And I'm going to start talking about what are lichens. They're composite organisms growing on trees, rocks, and soil that you come across on a daily basis. Symbiosis literally means living together, and in a lichen, what is living together is a fungus, algae, along with its microbiome. The fungi is providing the algae with a safe environment, while the algae is providing the fungi with food. And you mustn't be thinking, but what is the name of a lichen? And it is the name of the fungus. It does not account for the other partners. Lichens are very important for the environment, such as scenery to mimicry, material for nest building to birds and mammal species, as well as for food. And they're also important for humans, such as in the production of natural dyes, perfume, litmus paper, and even for consumption. One of the coolest things about lichens is that they produce over 1,000 different chemical compounds, most of them unique to lichens, including acids and pigments, and some of them may fluoresce under the UV light. These substances are very important for lichen identification. This leads to the part of research here that many of us in this room do, integrative taxonomy. And it's a framework to study species that takes into consideration many different types of data. Aside from chemistry I just mentioned, when you're out there in the field collecting ecological information, when you bring samples back to the lab and have analyzed unique characteristics as well as genetic data. All organisms have DNA, and therefore, we can use that to compare relationships amongst and within species. In this image, I have that type of data denoted by an evolutionary tree here, also known as a phylogenetic tree, which depicts how species are related to each other. And it was with genetic data that research showed the lichens are not a biological natural group. It has many and diverse origins. And lichenization is a fungal lifestyle. A long time ago, many different fungi independently evolved to partner with an algae that fed them, and now they depend entirely on that to survive. Most of the lichens that we see outside are called ascolichens because they belong to the phylum Ascomycota. The other group is the Basidiomycota, the phylum that has the typical mushroom-looking things. And out of the 20,000 currently known species of lichens, only about 1% are basidiolichens. I studied this minority, and this means that the lichens I study are more closely related to the mushrooms you commonly eat than to most other lichens. The group of basidiolichens I work is called Dictionema. It has 5 genera, and just by looking at these images, you can see it's very diverse. But I'm going to be focusing in just one of these genus called Cora that has this lattice shape. And after over a century being called Cora, a researcher proposed that coral lichens were to be named Dictionema glabratum. And it didn't matter where you collected it. If it was in Florida, Terra del Fuego, or any place in between, it should be considered the same species. However, as we walk into the 21st century, lichenologists started observing that maybe this was not one very wide and common species. Maybe these different colors and textures that you're seeing in this images, as well as the places that they were growing, were indicating that maybe these were many distinct species. But to test that, we needed to collect as many samples as we could of the entire Dictionema group to find out how diverse they were. And using integrative taxonomy, we found out that what used to be a single species is actually 180. And here in the middle, you can see an evolutionary tree depicting relationships among these samples. And on the sides, I have some pictures here. And notably, most of these species are not only separated by molecular data. Our data is supported by the different ways they look, the places that they choose to grow, which habitats they prefer, as well as their geographical distribution. For me, it's actually surprising that this has not been recognized before. And one of the places I focus is Brazil, where I research how diverse the group is there. And all Brazilian species are here denoted in the blue tips. And we can see that they do not share the same evolutionary path. What is interesting is that sometimes some of these species might be growing right by each other, but they have their closest relatives from Colombia, for example. And it is just like in your neighborhood. Most of the times, your neighbors are not your relatives. Many studies depend on this information we create to test different chemical substances or to infer ecological patterns, for example. Or in my case, I also aim to study the microbiome of all these species. And for different research questions, you depend on species delimitation, and you need to be sure that you're comparing apples to apples. And therefore, the simple fact of identifying and knowing what is a species is essential to any applied research. I hope that after my talk, the next time that you encounter something like this, you'll be able to see beyond the mammal and the tree, but also the lichens around you. And with that, I would like to thank all my colleagues and multiple funding sources, and I'll take any questions. Okay, so the question is, what's the oldest fossil lichen, correct? Well, the proved oldest lichen fossil is about 400 million years old. And then more recent research also proposed that it is about 600 million ago. But one that is certain that it has a proof that has fungi and algae living together, that is 400 million years ago.
So, Manuela, why lichens?
I fell in love with lichens 15 years ago when someone came over and gave a workshop on lichens, and I decided that that's what I wanted to do my whole life.
Thank you.
That was it. That's the story.
Regarding the significance of the Basidiomycota versus Ascomycete lichens, are the Basidiomycete lichens also that much less common or less ecologically important than the Ascomycete lichens?
No, they also are very important for the habitats that they're growing on. For example, the group that I showed today, they have cyanobacteria as a photobiome, and then they're very important in the habitat they live for fixing nitrogen. So they're equally important and probably play a different role, but still, a lot of them are growing together, but still have different roles. Do you mean in like a specific place or in general for like species number? They're much more diverse. If you go to a place, then most of the lichens are still, maybe this is what you're asking. If you go to a place to collect lichens, most of them are going to be ascolichens, yes. But there are a lot of basidiolichens here in the USA too. The group that I study is primarily tropical, but there's a lot of different species in the USA as well. But they are much rarer to observe, so it's a little treat.
Here's the real question. Why is it that the ascolichens are so much more diverse than the Basidiomycota?
That is the real question. So there are multiple hypotheses saying, but while lichens are more common in the Ascomycota, so it's a hypothesis that people think that either there is a common ancestor that was lichenized and then has multiple delichenization events, or there is the competing hypothesis that many different times there have been a lichenization process. So one origin or multiple origins within Ascomycota. And in the Basidiomycota, mycorrhizae are much more common. And the hypothesis is that once a fungi has taken up mycorrhizae as a lifestyle, then it's a dead end because it won't then turn into a lichen. So those are the current hypotheses about why there's so much more in ascolichens than basidiolichens.